Super Mario Bros. 2 might not be one of the most ambitious sequels ever made, but sometimes it's better not to rock the boat too much. The first game was a huge success, so I understand the hesitancy to mess with the formula, but due to the hesitancy, it feels less like a sequel and more like an expansion pack for the first game. The lack of ambition is disappointing. As a numbered full sequel, I wanted a new adventure, not just more levels. This is where Super Mario Bros. 2 USA comes in, the first what the actual fuck is that of the Mario series. Where's the Goombas? What happened to the pipes? Where's Bowser? Why the fuck am I throwing bombs at Chuck E. Cheese? If Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2 was guilty of not changing enough, Super Mario Bros. 2 USA might have changed too much. Granted, the series was only on its second iteration, but this version of Mario was still radically different from the first game. At the time, people in the States had no idea why Mario 2 was so different from the original. They probably figured that the guys over at Nintendo were testing the mushrooms that they were giving to Mario. It wasn't until the release of Super Mario All-Stars that the trick would be revealed. Nintendo had made a Mario 2 for the United States and a Mario 2 for Japan. But why did that happen? And are either of them any good? This is the Tale of Two Marios. You know, like that Chucky Dick book, The Tale of Two Cities. Yeah, it's a bad joke. I know, shut up. Oh, and before I get going on this, I'm going to refer to Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan as the Lost Levels, and Super Mario Bros. 2 USA as just Mario 2. So try not to get confused. Let's get into this. Part 1. Why are there two of them? The answer is pretty simple. In 1986, Nintendo of America decided that Americans weren't hardcore gamers enough to handle the true sequel to Super Mario Bros. Part 2. Okay, fine, I'll explain more. In the 1980s, Nintendo of America would playtest the games made by Nintendo of Japan before releasing them in the States. One of the guys responsible for playtesting was Howard Phillips. He started his role as warehouse man and resident gamer way back when Nintendo of America was founded in 1981. Howard sat down to play the Lost Levels and he thought it was shit. He thought that the game was hard in ways that made it less fun to play. He thought it was too cryptic with ways to move forward, criticizing the game for causing the player to take leaps of faith to advance through the levels. He felt betrayed by Miyamoto. I mean, seriously, look at this quote. He also felt that the game was too similar to the first one. He feared that the US consumers wouldn't see it as a worthwhile sequel because it looked, played, and sounded the same. He met with the head of Nintendo of America, Minoru Arakawa, and told him his complaints. Despite Arakawa multiple times asking Howard to please just get good and stop being a scrub, he understood that Mr. Phillips had a point. The game was frustrating to play and was too similar to the first one for Nintendo of America to feel comfortable shipping it in the United States. After a call to Nintendo of Japan, it was decided that the Lost Levels would not be a good fit for the American market. This begs the question as to why the Lost Levels is like this. Well, there's a few different reasons for that. The first is the old adage of don't fix what isn't broken. Super Mario Bros. 2 sold faster than your favorite online personality shills out NFTs. The game was a huge success, causing console sales to skyrocket. Fans in Japan wanted more Mario action, and the team was happy to provide it. Sales don't lie, staying on the path was the right choice, especially because the Lost Levels ended up selling 2.5 million copies for the Famicom Disk System, making it the most popular game on the device. The second reason that the Lost Levels is this way is probably because of the arcade. The team who worked on the original game also worked on the Versus arcade cabinet, which was an arcade conversion of the first Super Mario Bros. The arcade cabinet was more or less the same game, but with some changes to encourage players to spend more quarters. When the team was making these encouragements, they figured out that they liked them and thought that true Mario gamers might like them as well. The Lost Levels came from this desire to make a harder version of the first game for people that are like this. With this new difficulty in mind, they marketed the game in Japan as a harder version of the first game. With this new difficulty in mind, they marketed the game as not just a sequel in Japan, but almost like it was just a harder version of the first game, using these kind of quotes on the box. Dev time could be a third reason as to why the game is the way that it is. The time between the original Super Mario Bros. And the lost levels was only 9 months. Even at that time, that's a pretty short turnaround. The original developers were also busy working on multiple projects at once. Nintendo likely decided to use the same framework to save on dev time, meaning they weren't starting from square one. Too long didn't read version, Nintendo wanted to strike while it was hot because Mario was the big new brand at the moment, so they forewent further innovation just to get out another game. So how come in our Mario 2 you're throwing eggs at this muffler mouth guy? Well, that's because Mario 2 wasn't initially a Mario game at all. Mario 2 began its life as a game called Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic that was exclusive to Japan. The title roughly translates to Dream Factory Heart Pounding Panic. It was made for the Dream Factory event, which was held by Fuji TV in the summer of 1987. The Dream Factory was kind of like a mix between CES, Disneyland, and the World's Fair, except instead of blowing your minds with the sheer witchcraft of light bulbs, they were showing you the magic of television. The event actually looked pretty rad in the way that any 1980s Japan event looks pretty rad to a chronic vaporwave abuser like myself. Fuji TV asked Nintendo to make a promotional game and they put together a team to get it done. This was not the exact same team that created the original Super Mario Bros., but there is tons of carryover between the two projects. Toshihiko Nagako and Kazuki Morita would reprise their roles as programmers, Koji Kondo would produce the sounds and the music, and Takashi Tezuka returned for some level design work, or whatever this is supposed to mean. Shigeru Miyamoto would produce the title, helping the idea take shape, but the main head of the ship was series newcomer Kensuke Tanabe. Long before the event, Tanabe came to Miyamoto with an idea of a cooperative vertical platformer where you could move blocks around. While Miyamoto thought the idea was fun, he found it lacking for an entire game. Miyamoto straight up told the guy to make it more like Mario. Miyamoto, not a real Minecraft fan, confirmed. Tanabe took the advice and got to work adding in traditional levels and axing the co-op idea in the process. The game would take place in an Arabesque landscape with heavy inspiration from things like Arabian Nights. Fuji asked Nintendo to use the mascots that they had made for the event, but otherwise Nintendo was free to use whatever characters they wanted to. For the Dream Factory event, there was 4 Disney-like mascots for the event with big costumes that walked around. But instead of Disney staples like Mackie, Denlin, Plutus, and Groovy, you had Imogene, Mama, Lena, and Papa. These guys were the Imogene family, and with a few pixels and some mustaches, they became Toad, Peach, Luigi, and Mario. The Imogene's family pixel conversion would establish character tropes that would be canon moving forward. It is weird to think that that's really all they did moving these characters from one game to the other. Besides this pixel conversion, they kept all of the traits. So Mario pretty much inherited the traits of being an everyman and all-arounder. That trope started here. This game also marks the introduction of a taller and jumpier Luigi, which took him from "this is my Mario OC, please do not steal" to actually being a noticeably different character. Then there's the other two with weirder traits. If you've ever wondered why Peach can do this, you can thank Doki Doki Panic. But Peach isn't even close to the craziest ability. That award goes to Toad, who gets the ability of running very fast and being very strong. Really? That's all they did? Damn, they fucked my boy over. The characters weren't the only thing that changed when the game came stateside. They made the game look nicer overall. A lot of sprites got additional frames of animation or animation that wasn't there in the first place. Waterfalls went from H2O on methamphetamine to a more natural looking 9.8 meters per second. They also changed other things to fit the new Mario theme. The weird masks that you enter at the end of the levels were changed to weird birds, you know, the Mario staple birds. The blocks that you could stack were changed from masks to mushroom looking things. 1-ups were changed from characters' faces to a 1-up mushroom. And Koopa shells were changed to look like shells instead of Klansman propaganda. The port brought some gameplay changes too, like adding in a sprint button. The final changes were to the music. Many of the compositions are the same but changed slightly. Some of this is due to added instruments that would make the songs sound just a little bit fuller, but other songs were completely changed or reworked in a different way. For what it's worth, I prefer the Mario 2 versions of all this music. When Doki Doki Panic was released in Japan, the critics and fans seemed to like it. Japan Games magazine Famitsu gave it a 31 out of 40. Interestingly enough, they would give Super Mario Bros. 2 USA a 24 out of 40 when it was released in Japan years later. So now everybody knows why we got 2 Mario 2s, but are any of the Mario 2s even good? Part 2. Yeah, they're okay. Part 3. The finale. Okay, fine, dude. I'll go into a little bit more detail, but this question is a lot to unpack, so I'm going to start with Mario 2, and then I'm going to move to the Lost Levels. Before I do get into Mario 2, it's worth noting that I have a ton of nostalgia for this game. I spent an obscene amount of time with it growing up. I owned the GBA version and beat it way too many times. It wasn't until I did some research for this video that I realized that that version had a lot of changes from the real Mario 2, if you want to consider one of these the real Mario 2. It added in a ton of content, which is awesome, but the game also got GBA-ified. The music is worse because the GBA sounded bad. The washed out graphics are here to compensate for the bad GBA screen. And also, they added in voices for some reason. Like, I had completely forgot that they had added voices into this, but like, seriously, what in the fuck is this? I might decide to look at these weird GBA ports later, but for now, I'm playing the All-Stars version of this game, which is more or less a reskin of the original. I know it's not the original version. You can send me to gamer jail, okay? And I know there's gonna be that one guy that comments like, the All-Stars version has different subframe values for Peach's flutter jump. But I don't care. I don't, okay? Like, that's the version I want to play because it looks better. So, Ligma. With all that out of the way, something that I liked the first time I played the game, and I still like now, is how it looks and sounds. It's very clear that this game is not in the Mushroom Kingdom, which is weird because when they brought it stateside, they apparently tried to play down the Middle Eastern references from Doki Doki Panic, but they are definitely still here. There's desert environments, dark caves, flying carpets, palm trees in the background, and snakes everywhere. It is one heart removal away from being an Indiana Jones game. There's also other callbacks to the region, mostly in the architecture. There's pyramids, Egyptian crypts, and Lego castles. I prefer the Mario sprite used in this game compared to the original Super Mario Bros. He looks more on model for what he would be moving forward. His pants are blue and his shirt is red, as opposed to whatever colors this was supposed to be. All the animations seem to have a little bit more character to them as well, probably because Mario has like eyes that you can see. So when he has an animation like pulling something out of the ground, I really like the way it looks. He's just a lot more expressive than he's ever been. When you get down to one hit, the small sprites do look pretty weird. It's probably because they slapped the big head on the small body, so Mario's head is disproportionately large, but I mean, at that point, Mario's neck workout must be absolutely insane to support that kind of head. But I think that the real star of the show is the enemies. There's not any returning enemies, and many of the guys that debuted in this game wouldn't come back for years and years, or really some of them ever. Shy Guys more or less replace the Goomba as the slow-moving basic enemies. Ninjas are these cool little guys that like to jump up and down and can really slow you down if you're running too fast and not paying attention. Bob-ombs debuted here and would go on to be a series staple moving forward. Then there's the strangest character to grace a Mario game, probably ever, Birdo. I'm not even really sure what to call this thing. It shoots eggs out of its mouth at you. If you can even call this thing a mouth. I don't even know if it's supposed to be its mouth. It might not be. It literally has a cannon on its face to launch its unborn children at you. Mario 2 is already a sideshow of weirdness, but Birdo really takes the cake in being the strangest lasting addition to this game. Because Birdo wasn't just here, Birdo came back. Like, we have Birdo in the Mario Party games. It's a very weird character to be reoccurring. Unlike your mom, Mario 2 is more than just good looking. In the way that Mario 2 plays, it's definitely the biggest black sheep in the mainline 2D series, but I do like the quirks that make it unique. Its quirks are its strengths and weaknesses. Due to these differences, it might not end up scratching the same kind of Mario itch that was left after the release of the first game. Mario 2 might just be too different to ever feel like a real fulfilling sequel. Funnily enough, the series would do something similar with another game with a 2 in the title, with Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. If players went into either of these games expecting them to be direct sequels to the games before them, they would be disappointed. But if they wanted something new and fresh, then they could be pleasantly surprised. Even with that said, I don't think that Mario 2 is actually as different from the first game as people try and make it out to be. Your goal is to go from one end of the stage to the other, mostly by running and jumping. That's what you do in the first game too. Mario feels different than in the first game, but he doesn't feel like a completely different character. You're not going to be fooled into thinking that you're playing a Mega Man game. These games are very similar. And honestly, I prefer the way that he feels in this game than the way he feels in the first game. But not just him. I like the way that all these characters play, although I do have my preferences. All the characters feel nimble, but without feeling too floaty. They have a sense of weight, but it's not too much. Though I'm more than willing to admit that my overwhelming preference to the way that this game feels is probably due to familiarity from marathoning the game as a kid. The biggest differences are throwing items and the vertical levels, but even these aren't really that mind-blowing. I mean, vertical stages are what made Mario in the first place. It's where the series started. Donkey Kong was a collection of single-screen vertical levels, and it launched not just Nintendo, but the Mario franchise. The very first Mario Brothers game was literally one vertical screen. And to make that callback even more apparent, this game uses the same wraparound technology that game uses. I could even be more pedantic and say that the throwing items thing isn't new from here either. I mean, if you really want to get down to it, throwing items debuted in Donkey Kong because he tosses barrels. I won't be that guy, but you know, you could think about it. The item gameplay is unique to this game until the series moved forward though. Moving forward, Mario would be picking up all sorts of items and throwing them around. He would especially be using Koopa shells in unique ways moving forward, but this game does still have aspects of its item system that make it unique. The uniqueness comes from the way that you get these items. In future games, you would stomp on a turtle and pick up his shell, pretty self-explanatory. But in this game, you typically have to play a little bit of Harvest Moon before you can get your items. The other part of this item system that makes it unique is how important it is that you need to know how, when, where to use these items. They are an integral part of the gameplay. Pretty much everything on the screen at any moment can be picked up. You can pick vegetables out of the ground, pick up power blocks, pick up vials of PCP, and pick up enemies to send them directly to Suplex City.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Picking up and throwing items is very much the name of the game, and I think this is where the differences might be just a little bit too much to ignore for some people. And I mean, honestly, if we want to get down to it, there's way too many differences to count between the first game and this one. Besides some of the character stuff, really the only carryover from the previous game is the mushroom and the star power. Mario's diet must have worked because he can't stomp on enemies anymore. The fire flower's nowhere to be seen, underwater levels are completely gone, question blocks are missing, and it's the one game in the series without Bowser. He's instead replaced by other bosses. And all of these changes make you approach the game in a very different way, and I personally do like this direction. At the same time, I am glad that the series didn't go down this route permanently. But for one title, I did enjoy throwing stuff around like a monkey that just discovered his own poop. I like games with multiple physics scenarios going on, and this game gives me all that action. There's something satisfying about using an enemy as a weapon to kill another enemy from like 30 feet away. It just feels good. These differences allow the game to do some really cool stuff too. There's this level which asks you to ride around on these birds to progress. This level pretty much turns the game into an auto-scrolling level, which is pretty cool. There's also levels where you need to grab these keys and get chased by this mask. This leads to tense moments of cat and mouse as you're rushing to get to the door hoping that the mask doesn't kill you. My favorite part of this game is the secrets though. The original has its fair share of secrets and most of them are pretty straightforward to access, but Mario 2 feels like there's secrets around every corner and makes for a much more interesting game. Unlike the first game, I actually wanted to explore. The only reason that this exploration works is because of the largest addition to the series as a whole. In this game, Mario can go right and he can go left. I was shocked too. It's alright. You'll make it through. We'll be okay. But the real reason that this game feels so mysterious is those PCP bottles. These bottles take you to the dark world for a short amount of time. Throw them down somewhere and a door will open up, allowing you to explore the dark side of the level. It'll only let you walk around on the single screen to look for the secrets, so you're not really exploring a whole different world, but this is where a majority of the hidden items and warps are. You can find something as simple as a mushroom to gain an extra heart or an entire world skip. I found one of these by accident during my first playthrough, so I started the whole game over to play through the levels legitimately. But there's secrets that don't even need the power of disassociative psychedelics. Sometimes the secret is just trying to go left and skipping over the hardest part of the level. Even though I've played this game too many times, there are still things I feel like I haven't discovered, and that's a sign of a good game. Dense and interesting levels are going to beat out straightforward levels to me every single time. Even though I've been singing the game's praises, it's far from perfect. First is that these levels vary pretty wildly in quality. Some of them feel like they were created with just one character in mind, some of them are just standard left to right affairs, and others can lean on items just a little bit too much. Then there's the boss situation. I like Birdo as a boss, and I think the variations of them are pretty cool, but you just fight way too many of them. It got to the point where every time there was a different boss, I was just happy because it was a new challenge and a fun difference. On a side note, I do like all the bosses that aren't Birdo. This pizza rat, Mackie Must looking motherfucker is actually fun to fight against. This tri-headed dragon sets up a different type of challenge, and honestly, my favorite one-off boss is Mr. Krabs with these rocks, mostly because I actually died here quite a few times. The creativity with the bosses that aren't Birdo makes me want more of those and less of BMG nose over here. Being able to change characters is a very interesting idea, but it also brings its own set of issues. If you wanted to just main one of these characters, I think you'd have a rough time. I wanted to play as Mario just so I could compare apples to apples, but there's levels where you're going to want a different character. There is good reasons to play as all of the characters, and I think it probably helps with replayability. But when you feel like you have to switch to one character, it kinda sucks, even if it is pretty rare. I feel like aside from Peach, all of the characters are similar enough that they don't really bring anything new to the table. They're not compelling differences between any of the characters except for Peach because of the flutter jump. But really, those are my only complaints about Mario 2. I still love the sounds, the visuals, the slot machines. Dude, I love these things. I still find some of my favorite Mario music actually comes from this game as well. It is the black sheep of the family, but it adds things that I feel like wouldn't have been added for a long time otherwise. But this video isn't just about Mario 2, it's also about the Lost Levels. So, what did I think about the Lost Levels? Well, if you want to know my true opinion, I think that the Lost Levels fucking sucks. Okay, that might be a little harsh, but if Mario 2 is guilty of straying too far from the Mario formula, then the Lost Levels should be executed for breaking a restraining order to that formula. It's why I wanted to look at these games together instead of separately, because they both exist on the complete opposite sides of the spectrum. Mario 2 definitely changed too much, to the point where some people don't even think it feels like a real Mario game, even if they don't know about the origins of the project. Alternatively, the Lost Levels changed so little that it could be confused for being the same game as its predecessor. Honestly, it's so similar that there's really not a lot to talk about here. The graphics are the same as the first game, the music is the same as the first game, Mario controls the exact same as the first game. If you showed me a random clip and asked me which game it was from, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I mean, look at both of these and tell me which one of them is the Lost Levels. Seriously, I'll give you a second. If you answered A, you're wrong, because it's neither of them. Both of these are the original game. To be fair, they did make some changes. The biggest difference is that they added difficulty. The game is a lot harder. I could go full old school YouTube and talk about how this difficulty makes me want to shove a monkey's fist in my asshole and maybe throw a "what were they thinking" or two in there just for good measure, but I'm gonna spare you the theatrics. The original was never a complete walk in the park. I mean, there was some hard levels here and there, but it never made me want to tear my hair out. I found the first game a little bit too easy for my tastes, but it wasn't terrible. On the other hand, the Lost Levels did make me curse a few times, and I don't really think that the difficulty makes it a more enjoyable game. This is from somebody who likes hard games. I find hard games enjoyable. I even like games that are seemingly making fun of you for trying to beat them. But this kind of nail-biting difficulty isn't really what I want out of Mario, and certainly isn't what I want out of this version of Mario. If you watched my very first video, you'll know that I'm not crazy about the physics of the first Super Mario Bros. I think he feels a little bit too sluggish and unwieldy, and it makes some of these harder setups more frustrating than fun, in my opinion. I know that the world of Kaiju is huge, and people love turning these games into complete nightmares of difficulty, but that isn't really for me. I would sooner have a Lost Levels treatment for like Mario 3 or Mario World, because the physics are so much more enjoyable than the first game. And that's to say nothing of the way that they chose to make the game harder. Some of this difficulty comes from just asshole design. Jumping around in the hopes of finding a hidden block isn't really my idea of a fun time. Hoping that I land in the right spot because I'm dropping down off of the screen isn't really fun either. Having my jump destroyed by wind isn't a fun new mechanic. Games just don't approach difficulty in this way anymore, and for a good reason. There's times where this kind of difficulty just feels old, archaic, and occasionally completely unfair. And I know you can probably just say "durr, get good," but like, I beat the game. The difficulty didn't add any kind of fun factor for me. With all of that being said, the Lost Levels is more than just hard levels. Not every level is a nail-biting, butthole-clenching, controller-smashing experience. Really, most of these levels are more similar to the first game. They're just a little bit more difficult. And since I kind of thought that the first game was too easy, I do like the change, in theory. New enemies make you second-guess things, new power downs make you slow down before blindly grabbing a mushroom. Hell, even things like the warp zones can be used to destroy your progress. I like this kind of stuff. It's interesting. It's fun, it's not frustrating. All of these changes mean that for how similar the game is to the first game, it actually can't just be played like the original game. If you run in gung-ho all the time, you're gonna die over and over again. You have to be a little bit more methodical. There's gonna be blocks that you need to find and blocks that you don't want to find. Learning these levels is the only way that you can start to play them quickly. I like this. It rewards mastery, which is something that a Mario game should do. There's other platformers that's their entire thing. I mean, honestly, Lost Levels reminds me a lot of classic Sonic. Not because classic Sonic is hard, but in classic Sonic, going fast is the reward for level mastery. Most levels will straight up send you to furry hell if you try to speedrun them without knowing where you're going. The original Super Mario Bros. Was completely fine with you holding right and sprinting along and figuring out where you're going as you're going there, but this game doesn't really let you do that. This game demands that you slow down initially, but if you keep playing them and you get good at them, you can still speedrun them just like in the original. It just takes longer to get there, which is good. That's a good thing for a platformer to do. So yeah, I do have some positive things to say about the Lost Levels, but what do I think about it overall? Well, I was only really half joking at the front. I still don't like the Lost Levels. I can appreciate the game for what it's trying to do, but the way that it's trying to do it just isn't for me. It's almost there, but I feel like it just misses the mark by a few points. I like my Mario games on the easier side with some more difficult levels at the end of the game or unlocked through extras. This game feels like a collection of all of those levels, and it's just not really what I'm looking for out of the series. Moreover, as a sequel, I find it extremely disappointing. In general, I am okay with sequels sharing a lot of the DNA from the last game, but it shouldn't feel and look and sound like the exact same game. I know that standards were different back then, but seriously, it's almost a carbon copy if you're not paying attention. Sequels with little changes from game to game like Mario 2 get me worried about franchises. I see that happening now with certain series, and it gets me worried. I'm not excited about the new games in the franchise because I know it's going to be the exact same as the last one. Luckily, I have hindsight with Mario, so I know that the series wouldn't stagnate like this, but if I was there in the original timeline, I would be concerned. All I'm saying is I think that Howard Phillips had a point. I understand where he was coming from, and in some ways, I agree with him. It was very similar. It is pretty frustrating. It wouldn't have been a good release for the USA at that time. Part 3. Conclusion time. No matter which one you're talking about, Mario 2 is a divisive game. People are pretty quick to call either of these games the worst game in the entire series, and while I don't personally like the Lost Levels, it's not a bad game. It's got bad levels, but it's not an overall bad game. I beat it, and I didn't find that to be a chore. And if you think that Mario 2 is the worst in the series, just go ahead, scroll down just a little bit, hit the dislike, I know you already did, and then hit that unsubscribe button, because we're a Mario 2 fan club here. See you later. The saga of Mario 2 represented a very odd time in the timeline of Mario and Nintendo. Back before both of those names were a complete monolith of the gaming landscape, and not just back before then, but back before a Mario game had sky-high expectations. Again, this is the second game in the series. This time period was a heavily transitional period, not just for the big end, but for Mario as well. I was going to write some other conclusion about how Mario's really changed and like Nintendo's really changed and like nothing would ever be like this again, but really for everything that's changed, it's stayed the same. Nintendo, for their credit, they would kind of do something similar to this later down on the line on both sides. I mean, if you really want to get pedantic, Super Mario Galaxy is in some ways the Lost Levels of Mario Galaxy. The game is on the exact same engine as the first game. It feels the same as the first game. It's a little bit harder than the first game. In many ways, these games are very similar to the point where if you wanted to be a very pedantic person, you could say that it should have been an expansion pack or that it feels like an expansion pack. The difference between that argument with Super Mario Galaxy 2 and the Lost Levels is that Super Mario Galaxy 2 is actually a game worth playing. Hell, if we want to take this idea even further, 3D World went down the Mario 2 path. People still don't know what to make out of this game, and it's pretty much a direct sequel to Mario 2. It's also a very strange game in the series. It's a weird 2D, 3D hybrid. It feels strange to play. It's got fans, like myself, but I understand how people could see it as a disappointing game because they want a true 3D Mario or they want a true 2D Mario. And as if the callbacks aren't strong enough, the characters in this game are pretty much the exact same as Mario 2 from way back in the day. They even control the same, they have the same kind of setup. It's pretty nuts. If there was ever just a Mario 2 in 3D, this would be it. The only thing that really has changed is that we're never probably going to see a huge Japan-US difference in a Mario game. I mean, you'll see small differences, small translation changes, whatever, but you're not going to see an entirely different game anymore. It was an interesting experiment, and again, to Howard's credit, I think Nintendo of America did make the right call. After playing both of these games, I'm fairly confident that the American parent would not have wanted to plop down the extra cash for what to an untrained eye is the exact same game again. Some may view the move as overly cautious, but I think it was the right one in the end. Then we got to play Doki Doki Panic. There's a very good chance that if this didn't happen, that game would have never came stateside. It would be another Nintendo property that we never got to see in the United States. What do you guys think about it? Do you guys think that they should have released the Lost Levels as Mario 2 in the United States, or do you think they made the right call? Have you played both of these games, and if you have, which one do you prefer? I'm of course in the Mario 2 camp, but I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about it. And do you really think that either of these are the worst game in the series? I think that calling either of these games the worst in the series is probably overcritical, but I'm curious if maybe somebody actually has that opinion. Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, go ahead and violate that like button. Don't even take it to dinner first. And if you disliked the video, just destroy that dislike button. You guys won't be able to see it anymore, but I can. I'll know how bad of a job I did. Go ahead and let me know. If you want to see more terrible gaming videos, you can subscribe. And otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one.
That's right, we're Japanese.